Now, Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon.
Welcome to this episode of Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. Joining me on the phone, it is sometimes rock and roller and actor Dennis Quaid. He has a concert coming up on June 30th called the 2020 Concert for Love and Acceptance, which you can stream either on YouTube, Facebook, or simply at 4la.org/concert. That's F, the number 4, la.org/concert. And on that, bonjour, Monsieur Alain, Mr. Alan Niven, co-host. How are you?
I'm good. How are you this morning?
I'm excited because we've actually had rain in Montreal for the first time in about a month. So my brown grass might actually become a little less brown. Might turn to a nice shade of yellow by the time today's done.
Do you still have raccoons coming for water?
I do, and last night was fantastic because these two raccoons, and they're very distinct. They have I put out a couple of breadcrumbs for them, and they completely ignored the food last night. But I had a little tub of water sitting on the patio, and they hopped in the tub of water and just sat there. So my little tub of water, which is primarily used for water for the dog and stuff, suddenly became a raccoon swimming pool. So that is how desperate it's been in this part of the world. I mean, yesterday, and by the time you hear this, it's no longer yesterday, but we've been in the upper 40s, humidex and real feel, if you want, for the last 2-3 weeks. And we're talking Celsius, so 100, 106, 107, 108. And that is just not Montreal weather. And it is just beating me down. It is awful, awful. Anyway, shall we talk?
It's not Canada weather at all. And, somewhere in there, maybe there's a segue into having great balls of fire, which wasn't that the movie that Dennis Quaid played Jerry Lee Lewis?
Absolutely was. And we talk about it quickly during the interview because we did try to get, we talk about acting and we talk about stuff, but I did try to bring it back to Dennis Quaid and the Sharks, his band, which is not a great white cover band, by the way. Could be.
Hey, if he's going to call it Dennis Quaid and the Sharks, he'd better be trying to learn how to play rock me, but good luck with that.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be the first cover band for Great White, but anyway.
Oh, I can think of two myself.
Now, Dennis is also partnered in a new project called Audio Up, which is a podcast network, which maybe someday I will be a part of, because that would be actually very fun. He's got a show on there called the Dennissance, and he interviews all kinds of guests from all walks of life, which was originally my concept, by the way. Rock Talk has become sort of a branded name and has become this thing, but I was originally one-on-one with Mitch Lafon, and I kind of wanted to go back to that where I can interview Alexi Lawless, and I can interview Dennis Quaid, and I can interview whoever without having it to be rock-related. But when I went over to Podcast One and Westwood One, they said, we hate the name. You're a rock guy. It's got to be Rock Talk. And I was like, okay. And, well, here we are, Rock Talk. So.
Well, even if it's called Rock Talk, that doesn't mean that you can't talk about rock and roll with people who are not actually creating it or a part of it. And to be perfectly honest, I mean, not everybody in rock and roll in a band is eloquent and articulate, and there's an awful lot of them who just go, well, my record's coming out and I think it's really good and we've got a tour starting and nice talking with you, Mitch. I find it far more entertaining. I thought talking with Alexi was an absolute pleasure because he was excited to talk about rock and roll, and you could tell it meant a lot to him to have his music collection, and he was knowledgeable. And that, to me, was good rock talk.
It was. I have to say, talking to Alexia Lawless was fun. And if you listen to the interview, it wasn't really just interviewing Alexi. It was talking music, and it was almost like me and Alexi interviewing you at times where you got to talk about being around those guys, being around Bobby, being around Steven, and the fan reaction that I've seen on Twitter and other places has been very positive, because there are a lot of people that are writing me going, hey man, I'm a soccer fan first, and that's where I know him from, and I didn't realize he loved music like this. And so that was very cool, because I love Rat too. I had one like that just yesterday. He's like, I didn't know he loved Rat. I love Rat, and he's one of my favorite players. So wow. Which is, I guess, sort of what Rock Talk's supposed to do, right? We're bringing people together.
Absolutely. So you're going to put Trudeau on the list of interviews?
Sure, why not? Why not? Oh,
why not? Let's see if he's got a CD collection. Let's see if he's drunk cocktails with Bobby Blotzer. Of course, there is a tradition in Canada. Was there not a first lady who more than drank cocktails with a rock and roll band?
Well, yeah, Trudeau's mom, Margaret Trudeau. I think she was ensconced in the Rolling Stones camp, right? I can just imagine what Trudeau's playlist must be. It's got to be like Bare Naked Ladies, Blue Rodeo, Pursuit of Happiness. What's that other great Canadian band with Gord Downey? Tragically
I don't
Hip.
know, but there
Tragically Hip.
I don't know, but there would have to be a Ronnie Wood song in there somewhere.
Well, you know what? Hey, my phone has a Ronnie Wood song, because he does, back from 1992, he does a duet with Joe Elliott of Def Leppard. And so, of course, being a completist, I have to have it in my list. But let us get over to Dennis Quaid, talking about the Concert for Love and Acceptance, his new venture in podcasting with Audio Up, and all kinds of great stuff, including him telling us how much he adores Montreal, which who doesn't, honestly? Here is the one, the only, Dennis Quaid. We are speaking with actor Dennis Quaid. I know the show is called Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon, but once in a while, you got to go outside the box. And so on that, as we say in Montreal, bonjour, Denis. How are you?
Excellent. Really good.
Good. Well, we've got a lot of things to talk about. So we've got Audio Up, but we've got the Dennissance, and we've got some other podcasts and stuff. Well, let's get started here with the Concert for Love and Acceptance, which will take place on June 30th. And, of course, fans can check it out, the live stream on YouTube, and also at F4, so the letter F and then the number 4, la.org/concert. Talk to me about being part of that concert and what it stands for, because it is for GLAAD and for other philanthropic causes. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, and this is definitely a time where we need all the love and acceptance that we can get.
Oh, yeah, I agree. So now you're there as a performer. So talk to me about what are we going to see when we tune in to this show? Are you going to be doing country? Are we going to be doing rock and roll? What are fans going to get to see?
Well, I wrote a song called America, I Love You Too. And about 6 months ago, that I thought would be a great election year song. It's nonpartisan. It's I think it's unifying. And so I'm going to do that. And it's somewhere between country, western, and rock, somewhere kind of like, because 1, 2, 3, what are we fighting for? Sort of like that old song, Don't ask me, I don't give a damn. Next stop is Vietnam. It's one of those, protest songs back in the 60s. So it's
I know
a little bit like that. Yeah.
I know it well. So that's great. Now, in terms of other content, with COVID sort of shutting everybody down, other than this show that takes place on June 30th, do you have any summer plans? I'm assuming that you can't make any movies right now.
Nobody's making any movies right now. It's a great time to be in Pottywood doing a podcast.
Yes.
That's you can do that. You can social distance with your ears. Doing a podcast. We started a podcast platform, a podcast studio, if you will, really called Audio Up. And the Dennissance, which is my show, which is basically a talk show where I talk to people that I've met in my life and who have influenced me. And it's the first one out, but we have 17 scripted podcasts. We're doing like musicals or like the old radio shows of the 40s. And we have another show called Scripts from a Drawer, which is I have a script that wasn't done. It's on Spade Cooley, who was the king of Western swing. We're going to take that script, cut it into 6 parts, and do it as like the old radio plays.
Yeah, so let me talk a little bit about that, because part of what podcasting is sort of this sort of shoot from the hip, let's do an interview kind of thing. And then you look back to War of the Worlds and that stuff that you talk about in the 30s and 40s, where the family sat around, the kitchen table at 8 o'clock on a Sunday night and listened to that. Is that what you want to sort of recreate, that old school, where the content has a great value and not just disposable?
Well, we want to go through across all genres is what our aim is as well. And I like that idea. It's like old ideas that have a way of coming around, that are entertainment for people. That's basically what people are looking for to, buy their time. And it fits in perfectly. If you take a movie script and cut it into about 6 parts, and that's about 20 minutes an episode, which is about the amount of time people spend in their cars, usually, now that people are getting back in their cars. And it's to entertain. We have another show, which is coming out very soon, called Uncle Drank, which we intend to also do an animated television show with, sort of a la South Park or, Beavis and Butthead, one of those. Gary Busey is going to play Uncle Drank. And he's a parrot head, Gulf and Western star, not country Western, who was probably on a 30-year bender and woke up and now is making his reemergence.
I had a chance to listen to the
different ideas.
The Hick Start video, which I thought was great. Now, of course, I do my own podcast and I have my way of seeing things. When you got into this with Jared, you had said that you sort of want to take the world of podcasting from black and white into Technicolor, sort of referencing the old movies that went from black and white to Technicolor and, of course, opened up everybody's eyes. How do you think you do that? Like, what is it about podcasts that have drawn your interest? Because you have said, listen, I didn't listen to these things before, and then, whoops, something awoken, Jared awoken this beast in me, and now I want to be part of this. Where can we go with this medium?
2 years ago, I never listened to a podcast, to tell you the truth. And then Jared offered me this story, podcast, which was the first podcast to release a record. It was called Bear and a Banjo. And the people involved were Pooh Bear, T-Bone Burnett, and Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan contributed some lyrics to a song. And Jared had done a record with Pooh Bear. And so we put a story around the record, sort of like a la Red-Headed Stranger, Sgt. Pepper, that way, and created a story around this, a true fictional story of American music from the days of when radio first started. And it's, in effect, it brings back the concept album, which we all used to love so much, growing up and listening. You'd listen to an album as a whole, and you'd read all the liner notes, and, there was these stories and legends that were built up around them. And that's really what it's about, telling stories. And that's one of our aims, along with everything else. That's what got my interest in it, telling stories.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to that. And of course, MGM and Primary Wave have a stake in this company as well. So
we've got great partners.
MGM,
we have access to their scripts going back to the 1930s, movies done and undone, in fact. So there's a wealth of material out there that we can draw on, as well as our originals.
It's great, and I'm looking forward to this. Now, just because I know we're short on time, so let me just ask you about Dennis Quaid and the Sharks, Out of the Box. Came out last year. It's a fun release. I mean, I've checked it out. I knew this interview was coming up, so I said, I'll check it out. And Jamie Adler phoned and said, you got to check it out. So I did. Is that one of those, I had this music in my system and I got it out and merci, bonsoir, and off I go? Or is it something you want to develop and have Dennis Quaid and the Sharks, album number 2, album number 3? How do you sort of see the musical Dennis Quaid coming along?
Well, I've always been musical. I've learned to play guitar before I even started acting, and I knew I was never going to shred a guitar, so songwriting was my defense for that. And over the years, I've done many music movies, Great Balls of Fire, When I Thought Lights Went On in Georgia. There's about 2 or 3 more, and I've sold songs that I've written to films over the years. And so it's always been a part of me. And I've always had a band. I had a band called the Eclectics in the 80s, which was Bonnie Raitt's backup band. Basically, we shared bands together. And so it's something that I just have to do. I always do. Always will do. It's either with the Sharks or Jamie James, the guitar player of the Sharks, and I have split off, and we're doing a duet with the guitars, which highlights the songwriting, and playing more intimate clubs called Quaid and James. And I'm working with Robbie Krieger right now in the studio, the Doors, on a couple of things. In fact, Robbie's going to be part of America, I Love You, which we're going to do for TMT.
Yeah, and actually that was my next question. Robbie Krieger of the Doors, I've had a chance to interview him, just a terrific person and talent. Talk to me about working with him, because, when you're working with somebody who has been with the Doors, that is iconic in the sense of music industry, they revolutionized what was going on in the 60s. What's that like for you? And how did you get to meet him?
Robbie, the first song that I tried to learn when I got a guitar at 12 years old was Light My Fire. And, of course, it's some chords that are very hard to play for a beginner. But, always been a huge fan. And with the Sharks, we, right out of the box, when we started back in 2003, we started doing LA Woman and Riders on the Storm back to back, which is a 16-minute rock and roll, uninterrupted. And it was a lot of fun. And it came a time where I was invited to go to this charity, play this charity thing, and that Robbie was putting on, and I did Riders on the Storm there, and I just kept coming back. He can't get rid of me now. And we've become good friends. He plays golf as well, and it's you have to kind of pinch myself every once in a while, because it's Robbie Krieger, man, and he's such a great guy, really great guy. Like you said, one of the icons.
He is. And listen, I'm doing the same thing right now. I'm talking to Dennis Quaid and I'm pinching myself, because growing up through the 80s, a lot of your movies meant a lot to me. You would come to June, July and be like, oh, the new Dennis Quaid movie's out. You got to go see it. So I do want to ask you about a couple of them that had a great importance to me. But staying in the musical thing, you mentioned Great Balls of Fire. Talk to me about that role. Was that something where, you really wanted to get the essence of the man and say, this is what he is? Or were there a little bit of sort of dramatic licenses taken just to tell a good story? And what does Jerry Lewis mean to American rock and roll?
Well, Jerry Lee Lewis, I'll start with that. Jerry Lee Lewis, I think, was the first, truly rock and roll personality to really hit out there. He really embodied everything about that. Elvis, he's the king, right? There's no denying that. But Elvis was also kind of squeaky clean in a way, whereas Jerry Lee came along and he was a wild child, and it's really kind of the way he lived his life. He sort of embodied rock and roll, and great voice. What a great talent on the piano. I'd put him up against anybody. And he just lived it. He lived that, rock and roll lifestyle, basically. And when I got the role, I was lucky enough because I didn't play piano at the time. I played guitar, but I had a year to prepare for it. And so I sat at the piano for 12 hours a day, and I had many teachers, one of them who was Jerry Lee Lewis, teaching me piano during that time.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it was. Like I said, I have to pitch by. I've had a lucky life. I really have. And it's all about the left hand, really, about getting your left hand. It's an athletic move with that left hand, and if you can get that, you hardly need a right hand. But I still play, and I still continue to study him.
Do you consider that to be one of your greatest performances?
I have, but the way I judge my movies is about the experience I had while I was making it. And when I was doing Jerry Lee Lewis, I had a good time, so they tell me. That was I wound up in rehab about a year after we finished film, and it was back in the '80s. It was quite a time.
Oh, the '80s were fantastic.
Yeah, Jerry Lee was over my shoulder the entire movie, saying, "You're getting it wrong, son," and but at the same time, he could be very, very generous.
Boy, would I like to go back to the 80s. And before we wrap up, I got a couple more questions. For me, I remember this specifically going to a cinema down here in Montreal to go see Innerspace. Martin Short, fantastic. Yeah. Meg Ryan, fantastic. Talk to me about that movie, because it seemed to me that this sort of, shrinking everybody, technology kind of thing was sort of innovative. Did you find that to be a fun movie to make? And sort of how do you decide, I'm going to do comedy, I'm going to do serious, I'm going to do drama, I'm going to do musical. Talk to me a little bit about that one, because that one was sort of the one for me. And I know it might sound silly, but I love that movie.
I never had any kind of strategy in my career, except I wanted to do as many types of movies as possible. You know what I mean? I think that's what gives you legs. And Innerspace was so much fun to do. Marty Short and I, because I was playing a part where I'm shrunken down and I'm inside Marty Short, so we're at work every day together, so we could feed each other lines. And we just sat in my trailer and watched Meg walk by, and just had a blast. It was a ball to make, and it's the number one movie around the world that I'm recognized for, even though at the time it was a dud at the box office. I've been in the backwater of India, and somebody has said to me, Innerspace. And it became a classic movie. But at the time, when it came out, the poster, which is the way they used to sell movies before that, before the internet and all that, it didn't say anything about on the poster about comedy. People thought it was a science fiction movie, and stayed away from the box office in droves. But then they discovered it on VHS.
Well, I got to say, I paid the whatever, $6 or whatever it was back then to go see a film, and I loved it, and I still love it. Just let me get back to the Dennissance real quick. In terms of the show's content, you've had on Billy Ray Cyrus, you've had on Albert Pujols. God, my pronunciation. Pujols, yeah. You have people from different walks of life. What is sort of the show's vision? Is it just an interesting interview, or are there certain people you won't have on?
Well, I took this philosophy in it. As an actor, my favorite part of making a movie is the research that I do into the character that I'm playing, whether he's fictional or whether he's a real person. And I try to capture the essence of that person. That's why I love acting, is to figure out what makes people tick. And so I took that same approach in the interview process for the Dennissance. In fact, I interviewed Jimmy Morris the other day, who I played in The Rookie. And but I bring that same sort of line of questioning into the process of maybe you get sort of a different take than just a regular interview, which you do so well. I figured that would be what I would be good at and make it a little different.
And it's working out. I listened to a bunch of the episodes and I thought it was just fantastic. That Adam Carolla episode is classic. And then where else can we go here? Just real quick, Uncle Drank, the Totally Hammered podcast. You mentioned that earlier. When does that start airing? And I think it's like a limited series, but at some point, do you see yourself renewing it and moving it forward? And talk to me about actually scripting these shows.
Yeah, that's a scripted podcast, and we're really looking at it as a television show, animated television show for your ears, which we are looking to make an animated show a la South Park or Beavis and Butthead, in that genre for Uncle Drank, and it's just a natural fit to make that leap with that, and we've been having really good response from the record companies to do this. We're bringing in a lot of country western artists, and what we're going to call Gulf and Western from now on. And Gary Busey is going to play Uncle Drank. He's a perfect fit. Somebody's been out for 30 years and coming back, and it's going to be very, very funny.
I listen. I can't wait. I've had a little sneak peek at some of the audio, but I can't wait. Just real quick, speaking of the '80s, the president at the time was Ronald Reagan. Reaganomics and the whole thing. Your movie Reagan was supposed to come out, or it's coming out. The filming has been postponed. Talk to me about.
We're going to start filming that September 1st.
So yeah, great. That's good news. Talk to me though about that role and without sort of being a spoiler, how are we going to, are we looking at this more in terms of a historical representation or more of, the 80s were sort of a roaring 80s? And what's the approach to this film? And how did you decide to do President Reagan?
Well, I was asked, a group of people that were close to Reagan actually gave their blessing to this film. And it looks at his whole life. Ronald Reagan's life itself is very interesting, and he was in radio himself. He used to call baseball games. He was a lifeguard who saved about 60 people. He grew up really during a very interesting time at the first third of the 20th century. There in the Midwest, he's definitely a product of the Midwest. He was, he became a movie star, a B movie star, if you will. And for all that, and he was a spokesperson, the first one to really actively seek out branding in entertainment, and with General Electric. He was also, what I find really fascinating about Ronald Reagan, besides all his achievements and everything, was that here's a person that everybody really thinks that they knew. But those closest to him, he was a mystery to people who were closest to him. And therein lies the really interesting part about what makes Ronald Reagan tick.
I mean, the 80s were. Listen, I love the 80s. We will, of course, remind folks that the Dennissance can be heard on Audio Up, which is a very, very exciting platform. I'm very much looking forward to it. The Concert for Love and Acceptance, June 30th. And Dennis, listen, I could go on for another hour, but merci. I know our time was limited, so merci beaucoup. And this is great. This is great. Yeah. I think Audio Up is very exciting.
Montreal?
I am in Montreal, yes. And you came in.
I love it. Bowery. Where ever get the freeways fixed over there?
Yeah, where did you play that? You played a bar St. Paul or St. something like that last year? Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, that was a great time.
The old city. I love Montreal. I love going there. I love the people, the food. The summertime is just the most probably the most glorious place in North America.
I won't disagree. And these days we've been in the high 90s for the last week. It's brutal but beautiful. But okay, let me. I'll just ask you this real quick. Have you filmed? You obviously must have filmed here before, right?
Yes, I have many times, in fact.
And
I did a television series there called The Art of More. Done a couple of movies there over the years. It's a great place to shoot. A lot more fun than Toronto.
I agree.
I'll put that in there.
I'll agree.
But
and we have a better hockey team.
The freeways yet?
Fixing freeways is a part of the long-term plan. It's been about 50 years that we've been working on it.
Right.
But we're good at winning Stanley Cups, and we got great bagels.
Yeah, Montreal Barre.
Yeah, listen, it is the capital of the orange cone, but we've got great smoked meat and great bagels. Pardon me?
Yes.
Yeah. So there you go. And on that, merci, monsieur. And boy, man, Audio Up, man, that is a great platform. Very much looking to see how you and Jared and MGM and Primary Wave develop this, because I think it will become the industry standard for podcasters.
Well, your mouth to God's ears. That's what we want to be. It's like the YouTube of podcasts. It's really like a movie studio. We're changing the name to Pottywood.
There you go, Pottywood. And on that, thank you.
You can't make movies out here anymore, Gene.
No, you can't. All we can do is podcasts. I got to say, COVID has been the greatest for me. I used to do one show a week. I'm now doing 3 shows a week because everybody's home and talking. So,
right. It's a great time for that.
It's a great time. Great time for podcasting, yeah. And, just thank you, by the way, for all the movies. There's so many to list, but like Innerspace and Great Balls and Right Stuff. And listen, you're the best. That's all.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Have a great day.
Merci, là. Bye-bye.
Want to take a shower with Mitch? Hey, Siri, play Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon.
I couldn't find Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon in your music.
Ugh, she never works.